You can now subscribe and save 20% off with a Stravacraft coffee subscription. We know a bunch of you have taken advantage of the one-time code, and now you can save 20% off on your favorite coffee forever. And you'll never have to enter your credit card info again. How it works is you pick every 2, 3, 4, 6, or 8 weeks when you want that Stravacraft coffee sent to your door. You tell them how much you want, when you want it, they'll send it. You never have to worry about running to the grocery store to get some coffee. And you'll always have that rich, tasty, CBD-infused coffee in your pantry or wherever you keep it. And you'll get 20% off every single time they send it. It is stress-free, thought-free, and you'll have that coffee ready for you anytime. So if you want to just try it once, then of course you can still use that code DNVR20. But consider subscribing once you realize how much you love it and get 20% off ever. It's Stravacraft coffee. It's CBD infused, and it is delicious.
Number one for the one and only DNVR. 2 goes out to Zach, Mace, Star K, and the bar. 3 for Mr. B in that old trophy case. Number 4 we're still waiting for. Well, bring on Chase. Out on the field, a mile high, Broncos win is odds. I couple with a breakfast crew and a friend bleed orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us at DNVR. We are DNVR.
Welcome in to the DNVR Broncos podcast presented by MSU Denver Online. Make sure you check them out. msudenver.edu/online is where you can find out all they have to offer. We're talking 40-plus online and hybrid programs, 750 total classes. There's something for everyone down at MSU Denver. And when you sign up and get over there, you have a chance to work twice as many hours as anyone attending any institution in Colorado, because that's the way MSU Denver structures it. They want you to be able to keep that full-time job and further your education. So hopefully down the road you can have a higher paying, better full-time job. MSU Denver is the perfect place to work and go to school at the same time. So check them out, msudenver.edu/online.
My boys, what's up? Happy Monday, guys. Happy to be rolling with you today. And is this the best weekend of sports, especially football? Because you got not only just 2 games, now you got triple headers on Saturday, Sunday, and then, of course, a national championship game tonight.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the game. Look what you're wearing, Zach. The Crimson Tide shirt. It's it's the Brave. The way you can tell the difference between the Crimson Tide A and the Atlanta Braves A is the Crimson Tide A has that mullet up top.
I'd love it. And of course, big game tonight, man. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that a little later. But first, of course, we got to talk about the Broncos GM search. And we're very lucky to have, fresh off of his interview with the Denver Broncos, Mace. I assume that's what you dressed up for.
Yeah, Broncos beat. It'll be on tonight at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time on My 20 in Denver. Of course, that means you need to watch that for a half hour before turning over to the national championship game. So, you choose if you want to join me and our friends Cecil Lammy and James Palmer. We'd be happy to have you. Of course, Alexis Perry hosting. But it's weird. Actually, I'm not used to sitting here on this show with a jacket on like this. I feel I don't know, feel a little out of place.
You're looking sharp.
You look great, and you also you do look like this is probably what it looks like when the Broncos interview candidates over Zoom. Oh yeah.
Although I would wear a tie though. If I were George Payton or Champ Kelly or Brian Stark or Jerry Fontenot, Dave Ziegler, I would have a tie. I think it's worthy of a tie for an interview. That's the only thing. So maybe you could say that I just had a tie on and I loosened it to talk to you guys, but I went tieless today on the show, guys. I couldn't help it.
Well, that's what the off season's about, right?
Yeah, a little more casual, little less formal, and unless you're actually interviewing for the GM position of the Denver Broncos. I'm guessing that Joe Ellis and John Elway were informal, but I would expect that the GM candidates were dressed to the nines, even on Zoom.
So let's recap, because it was a weekend action-packed full of football, which, by the way, 3 games on both days. A blessing of all blessings. I can't believe how amazing that was. Like, I was at the DNVR bar for 14 hours on Saturday. It was like a dream. Anyways, Zach, why don't you get us caught up on what went down over the weekend, and then we'll get into where we stand now.
So Friday, Broncos have virtual interviews with Champ Kelly and George Payton. Last week I was saying Paton, my bad. George Payton. Those two guys
I'm
on
gonna keep saying
Friday.
that for a little while, just while it's a transition phase for me.
And then on Saturday, they interviewed Dave Ziegler. Who else did they? And the names are slipping me right now. Terry Fontenot. And then because those two went too long, they waited to do Brian Stark's Sunday morning. And apparently Brian Stark's interview, according to Mike Kliss, was just a courtesy interview. There's not a big interest there. So just
why do we need to report that?
Yeah, why are they putting that out there? Why is that being made public?
Yeah, I feel bad for Brian Stark. But so on Sunday, also, we have Dave Ziegler, or I guess Saturday, Dave Ziegler comes out and says that he is withdrawing his name from the running to stay in New England. Not a surprise after Nick Caserio left for the Texans. He pretty much takes that job and is now Bill Belichick's #1 guy in the personnel department. So it seems as of this morning, I should say last night, that the Broncos were down to 3 serious candidates. But then this morning, according to our friend Brandon Cristal, friend of the program, comes out that the Broncos are deciding whether they want to do second interviews, potentially in person for the candidates that can do in person, or do they want to go out and interview more people virtually? So that's where we stand right now, guys. And also, in the result of the Saints-Bears game yesterday, the Broncos can do in-person interviews with every candidate they've had virtual interviews with, except for Terry Fontenot, because the Saints won. So they would have to wait at least another week, but they'll be able to interview Terry Fontenot in 1 week from now after the Bucs take care of business against the Saints next week.
So, well, we'll see about that. The Bucs got smacked both times they played the Saints this year. So this leaves me to wonder a few things. Of course, I think your first reaction when you hear, they want to interview more candidates is, well, maybe they didn't hear exactly what they wanted to hear from the first 5 candidates that they interviewed. But, well, I think that is very much a possibility. I think there might be something else at play here. The Broncos know that they already said before that they wanted to do in-person interviews with their final candidates. And so they already know they're going to have to wait before they could ever do an in-person interview with Terry Fontenot. And I wonder if in the process they thought to themselves, well, instead of just sitting around here waiting, why don't we expand the search, see if there's anyone else we want to, push this back another week, and hope, that the Saints lose next week. And then maybe we find another finalist. Maybe we're exactly where we are now. We can shut up the media members who are saying we didn't interview enough people, and stay busy. And maybe we luck out and someone surprises us.
Absolutely. I don't think that's something that can be discounted either, guys. And of course, also some news this weekend that unfortunately Joe Ellis's mother passed away to COVID, and that could also potentially change just the timing of this hire, since we know that the Broncos search committee is very small. It's Joe Ellis, Vic Fangio, John Elway, and Patrick Smythe. Those 4 people. It's not like they have 20 people on this committee where if one person misses a day or even a week of this, that it's okay. No. You have the guy with the most power dealing with the death of his mother. So thoughts and prayers out to the Ellis family. But guys, this could also impact the timing of why rush it right now when Joe, I have to imagine, is dealing with plenty of stuff on the side right now.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, you don't have to rush this. I mean, you've got the Joe Ellis's family situation, and thoughts and prayers out to him and everyone in his family after the death of his mother. But when you have John Elway and you still have Matt Russell kind of on the job, tying up loose ends in the moment, you don't have to rush on this. You don't need to have somebody in tomorrow or even by the end of the week. Ideally, you'd like to have somebody in before you get down to Mobile for the Senior Bowl in a couple of weeks. But I mean, shoot, you could be announcing that on a week from this Friday and be good to go for that the following week. One thing I know that has come into play now. I know we have a comment saying that Terry Fontenot took himself out of the running. I haven't heard that. What I have heard, though, and I think Adam Schefter noted this on Twitter or on a report, that Terry Fontenot looks like he is in the Falcons' sights, that he is going to be one of the finalists for the job in Atlanta. And so you wonder if that sort of comes into play as well, that maybe they liked Fontenot, but it looks like Fontenot is could be targeted by the Falcons. Apparently, a Fontenot Joe Brady tandem is gaining steam down in Atlanta.
How about Joe Brady? How about that type of guys? That's pretty crazy.
He's this year's Sean McVay. You know, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, he's the hot young name, but you mentioned his rise. I mean, 13 months ago at this time, he's a co-offensive coordinator for LSU. Not even the guy. He's sharing duties. And, of course, he had a background with the Saints that helped him get the job with Carolina, and look at him go. It just shows that there are a lot of teams that when it comes down to it, they are looking for the next hot young offensive mind, and they think Joe Brady's that guy.
To me, it also shows that everyone benefits from a great quarterback. If Joe Burrow never transfers to LSU, we just wouldn't be having this conversation right now, like straight up. And that's not to take anything away from him necessarily, as much as it is so much about this is circumstance. You catch a wave because he wasn't even the co-offensive coordinator before that season, correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
So one season as a co-offensive coordinator in college, one season as an offensive coordinator with an offensive head coach in the pros, and now he's going to be a head coach likely. Just crazy how catching the right wave and how far it can take you.
I mean, he was an offensive assistant for the Saints in 2018. Think about that, offensive assistant. I mean, that's the guy who's cutting up film.
I thought it was crazy enough that last night the Browns had an offensive assistant as their offensive line coach for the game. I thought that was crazy. Now that, I mean, if we're talking Joe Brady terms, he's a head coach in 2 years.
How about that? Really bad night for head coaches last night because not only did it prove that you can win a playoff game without your head coach, it also proved that you can win a playoff game without practicing. Head coaches around the league are just like pulling their hair out today because the players have a lot of steam for less practice.
Yeah, if you're JC Treader, who's the player who is the head of the union right now, you've already put out the letter saying that you'd like OTAs wiped off the calendar, and now you just won without practicing until Friday. You're like, excellent. Here, we've got something.
It was a great night for JC Treader in pretty much every single way.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you mentioned the pairing of Fontenot and Joe Brady, and that word pairing got a little bit of steam here in Denver over the weekend too. A little bit of buzz around a potential George Payton, Champ Kelly pairing because both of them could take a promotion in Denver. What do you guys think of that idea? Mace, I'll start with you.
I think it actually makes a lot of sense given that Champ Kelly's kind of 2 levels down, and it would be a huge jump for him to be the GM. But really, the replacement for Matt Russell is almost as important a hire here as who is going to be the GM, because the GM is going to be more of a big picture person. It's not now their personnel eye. It's going to matter and certainly can be kind of the eyes that break all ties. But a lot of the GM's work is going to be kind of related around contracts. Like, for example, we know John Elway has a reputation as a tough negotiator, and it can rub some players the wrong way, can rub some agents the wrong way. the GM is going to have to work on those relationships, having the relationship with the coach as well. And so maybe getting those things on solid footing is going to be a little more important in the short term for the GM than getting to the nuts and bolts and nitty gritty of scouting. So that's why the replacement for Russell, that hire is important. And I think you'd have a lot of confidence in Champ Kelly stepping up to not overseeing everything, but still focusing on the scouting and personnel side of it. I think that pairing would work really well.
Yeah, and I absolutely love it. I think the pairing would work well. And also, guys, the Broncos would land their top 2 guys, and it would remind me back to the head coaching search with Mike Munchak. You got him in the door because you thought he could be a good head coach, but you got him in the door. You got that interview because you had in the back of your mind, man, if we don't land him as the head coach, could we convince him to come to Denver? Maybe the Broncos knew about the family ties, so they thought even more so they need to do that. If the Broncos go into this and land their top 2 guys, that would be huge. I mean, how are you not walking away saying that is a win-win? But my only question and hesitation to this would be, well, if you're hiring George Paton to be the GM, shouldn't you let him choose his guy to be his right-hand man? Matt Russell was not forced to be John Elway's right-hand man. John Elway got to choose Matt Russell to be his right-hand man. So that's my only hesitation with this. From an organization standpoint, from John Elway's standpoint, it would be a huge win. From George Paton, the very first move you have to make is kind of hire someone that's being forced on you. That may not be ideal for him.
Now, remember, though, John Elway, his right hand that first year was Brian Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
And
what did he do with Brian Sanders?
Yeah, after a year gone. So, I mean, that's an example of maybe having it forced on him. But also, in that instance, you had John Elway having no practical personnel experience when he became the executive VP at the time. And that's why he kept Brian Sanders on to kind of help him learn the ropes a little bit. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic, and it can work. It certainly worked for some good drafts there in 2011 and 2012 before they parted ways with Brian Sanders. So it can get the results maybe that you want, even if it's less than ideal, if you're kind of forcing someone on the GM. That being said, if you're going to give the GM that much power, then if he hires Champ Kelly, say it's a Payton Kelly pairing, then I would imagine it's not happening unless Payton is completely okay with it and would bring in Champ Kelly if he were going to another situation. So I wouldn't worry too much about that if that's the pairing that transpires, because Payton has opportunity. He's interviewed with the Lions. He's got a lot of connections with the Lions as well. So Payton has options here. I don't think he's going to take the job, a job where somebody is forced onto him. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
I think this had to have been discussed in the interview. And they just said, hey, who would you bring in as your right-hand guy? Maybe he said, I'd love to get Champ Kelly, and that's how it all started. Or maybe they said, we think that we might be able to have Champ Kelly join you. What would you think of that? And he must have, maybe, he liked it. One thing I don't love about this, correct me if I'm wrong here, you couldn't do the opposite of this, right? You couldn't bring in Champ Kelly as GM and George Paton as his right-hand guy?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't want the Broncos to fall in love with getting both and just make that their top option here, because if you do this with Champ Kelly, and let's say you think these guys are neck and neck, and this is kind of your tiebreaker, is you can have both, well, there's a very good chance you lose Champ Kelly soon if you do that. And I just want the Broncos to make sure they think which one of these guys is the guy that we are more confident in having for 10 years. Because if you do this combination, wow, it sounds great. It sounds like a super team. You don't know how long. It could be 1 year. It could be 5 years. It could be 2 years. But, don't get caught up in the moment of thinking this would be great to have right now and lose sight of the fact that maybe deep down you would rather have Champ Kelly for 10 years.
So then why would you not have Champ Kelly just be your guy if that's the situation? What are you afraid of?
I don't think they're afraid of anything. I'm just saying that could be their tiebreaker is, hey, we're really tight neck and neck with these two guys. Why don't we get both? And to me, I say, like, you need to grind it out harder and figure out which one you like better, not just fall in love with the we can have both plan.
I totally agree. I completely agree with you. And you're right, because you can't do it the other way. You can't have George Paton be your number two. And in this situation, the most important thing here, guys, is getting the GM in place. Mace, I know you say that the Matt Russell type may be more important, but to me, just hire the guy that you like the best, and then he can surround himself. Because if you're giving him control of the 53-man roster, you should also be giving him control of who his right-hand man is. And if you feel comfortable giving him control of the draft, free agency, everything, you should also feel comfortable with who he's going to bring in. And while I do like the Broncos potentially saying, we really like Champ Kelly, George, are you okay with him being your right-hand man? Him saying, man, I'd love him. This is a guy that I've wanted to be by my side. Well, if that means then that combination's it. That's perfect. But if your guy is Champ Kelly and he's obviously not going to bring in George Paton, well, then that's okay, because you're right, Ryan. If everything goes well, you're going to lose that right-hand man in a year or 2 or 3, but you won't lose the GM.
Yeah, it's funny because if it's a Payton Kelly pairing, I have no worries that George Paton be 100% behind this, because everything we've heard so far is that the new GM is going to make the call on everybody in the personnel department. So I don't think you're going to have a scenario where you're going to have somebody forced on George Paton at all. I think there may be a recommendation, but I don't think it's going to be where, your hand is forced to hire this guy, kind of like Vance Joseph. We want you to have Mike McCoy. I don't think it's going to work that way at all.
You hope not, because those are the types of things you think about when you think of those things.
Right. And I get the trepidation, just because you did have the Joseph McCoy situation. And even there, for a brief moment, it looked like Vic Fangio was going to have Gary Kubiak as his offensive coordinator.
Yep. And it didn't.
And then it became Rich Gangarello. But don't forget also, you have John Elway kind of stepping up and out of this scenario. So the landscape is different now than it was both when Fangio was hired and then when Vance Joseph was hired.
All right. Next thing I want to do is just see where you guys are at in terms of your favorites for the job. I think were we all on Champ Kelly early in the last week? No. Zach and I both kind of started with Adam Peters, thinking that he was going to have a good chance of this. Never really gained any steam. So where are you guys at now, Zach? I'll start with you. You're shaking your head at yourself.
Oh, yeah. Ryan, I follow your footsteps, because you were right on the Vic Fangio hire. And Adam Peters, he's cooled down considerably. He was getting tons of interest all around the league, and just not even an interview with the Broncos. But where I'm at right now, I've shifted from a little bit at the end of last week. I was on the Champ Kelly bandwagon. Now I'm going to the George Paton side. And I really do think that this 1-2 pairing we talked about is the front runner for the Broncos right now. And that means that George Paton is the front runner in my eyes.
Yeah, I think Payton's slightly ahead. And one thing that I think has sort of changed in all this is that even though you don't have GM experience among any of these candidates, I think they've zeroed in more on the guys who are at a higher level. Certainly, by all accounts, Terry Fontenot had a very impressive interview over the weekend, and so did George Paton. And those two guys are a step above Champ Kelly on the food chains of the respective organizations in which they've served. And so maybe the thought is, okay, Champ would be kind of level jumping. It'd be sort of like hiring a quarterback coach to be a head coach. It's been done. It's not done that often. Usually you're thinking coordinators. Payton and Fontenot, these are guys that have been coordinators. It's not the same kind of jump, and maybe they think that's something that is a little more appropriate for what they're looking for right now.
Yeah, my gut tells me, and especially based off the information that we have, the Fangio-Munchak situation feels so similar to this, where they did the interviews, they liked two guys, they said, we can have the best of both worlds, let's do that. my gut tells me that has a very good chance of happening. But since you guys both went that way, I'll mix it up a little bit here, because I am reading the tea leaves into this whole should we interview more candidates thing, and I do think it's a reaction to Terry Fontenot. They don't want to rush this thing. They want to be able to sit down at Elway's or wherever with Terry Fontenot because they're very intrigued by him. Obviously, Terry Fontenot's Saints wiped the floor with Champ Kelly's Bears yesterday. Now, that doesn't mean much, but I think
Champ was side Mitchell Trubisky, then it's on him.
That's the thing right there. If he's Team Mitch, then, well, that's on you.
Totally different game if they don't drop that perfect pass on the trick play, in my opinion. But either way, I do think there's a lot of interest in Terry Fontenot from the Broncos side, and I think that this whole we might interview more candidates thing is a reaction to their interest in him. So I'm going to say that Terry Fontenot is my favorite right now.
And I like that. So I have a question for you guys. How important is an in-person interview? Because I guess the Broncos could interview Terry Fontenot a second time virtually today and hire him today and get him in the building tomorrow. Obviously, he's not going to quit his job with the Saints right now just to come interview in person in Denver with the chance of him not getting the job. But I imagine if you offer him the GM job, he'd be willing to quit today in order to join the Broncos tomorrow and be in the building tomorrow. But he's not going to do that just without a job offer. So how important is the in-person interview, especially with Terry Fontenot getting interest from other teams?
It depends on how you go about this process. I imagine that you have Joe Ellis and John Elway, two guys who are in their 60s. They're more old school. They probably want the in-person interview to kind of see body language and things like that don't necessarily show up on a Zoom conference. So I would surmise it's probably more important for them than it may be for some people of a younger generation, perhaps.
I'll just look at this from my own perspective in our company. If we were hiring someone to be, a partner in the company, I would want to be able to sit down and have dinner and have some drinks and chat it up for hours just about whatever to make sure it's a fit. Go beyond the resume, go beyond all that stuff. Does this person fit in with what we're trying to do? Are we going to get along? That's important, even though we think John Elway and Joe Ellis are going to be removing themselves. We know Joe Ellis isn't going to be seeking a new contract. We think John Elway is going to be less involved. I just think, they're saying we're handing over the keys to our favorite thing in the world to this guy. Let's make sure we like him.
Yeah, and I certainly think that that's the approach that the Broncos are going to take, and why it would make sense to, instead of just waiting a week and tipping your hand on who your guy is, that you do interview some other guys. Because, guys, what if the Broncos do wait for an in-person interview with Terry Fontenot and they hope it happens next week, which I think it will, but they hope it happens next week, and then he chooses the Lions or something, and then the Broncos are just stuck there saying, oh my gosh, everyone knew that we wanted this guy, but for a variety of reasons, we lost him. Now at least interview an Adam Peters or other guys around the league. Just what if one of them surprises you as much as Terry Fontenot did?
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned Peters because he's had some interviews. Among the spots he's interviewed was Carolina. Carolina interviewed 13 people for their GM position. So you look around and you see the positions being filled, and it's possible. Let's say you had Houston, for example. They apparently looked like they had Omar Khan in their sights. Looked like they were taking a long look at Louis Riddick, and then Jack Easterby, the ex-chaplain who has way too much control of things down there, decides, I'm going to bring in my old buddy from the Patriots, Nick Caserio, and they just kind of tear all that up. So you're looking at a scenario where Omar Khan of the Steelers is out there. Maybe Lou Riddick is back in the mix. So maybe the candidates that you thought were going to be taken by other teams are still going to be out there. So do you do your due diligence on them over the course of this week?
I mean, obviously the Texans aren't the organization that you want to be following in their footsteps, but aren't you at least interested why they were about to hire Omar Khan? Don't you want to have him in for an interview? Just why would you not interview all of these people and make your own decisions for yourself?
And Khan especially, because the Steelers model, that's the one model that in terms of team building and sustaining a winner, that I think it's possible to replicate somewhere else. That at the minimum, I want to pick Omar Khan's brain.
Yep.
Absolutely. And that's what you get to do. And that's why, I had some people reach out to me saying, what are the Broncos thinking interviewing Dave Ziegler? Look at the Patriots roster this year. It is not good. And to me, he was never really a serious option for the Broncos. I never thought he was a top guy. But hey, we've said the Patriot way has been successful for the past 2 decades. Might as well pick someone's brain who's been in there the past 5 years, really at a high level. So I think it was smart to interview a guy like that and just pick these brains. And also, you're not spending any money to do this. You're not bringing a private jet to have someone come here, and you're not even paying for an expensive meal at Elway's or anything like that. You're literally jumping on a Zoom call for 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, the Patriot way has been successful in New England, and it's making some inroads in Miami. But most places, it has been where you've tried to take the seeds and transplant them somewhere else. It hasn't taken root. It hasn't worked. Whereas you look at the way the Steelers have gone about their business, and really the Steeler way goes back decades. It goes back to Chuck Noll in the 70s, and you've seen places around the league where it has borne fruit. I mean, Tony Dungy is in his background. He's a Steeler way guy, and look what he did. And John Fox was somebody who learned an awful lot from being around the Steelers in terms of how to build a sustained, successful contender, and did that in Carolina, and of course got Peyton Manning, but did well in Denver. So that philosophy is one where I want to find out what goes on and what makes things work in Pittsburgh, because for the better part of 5 decades, they've had relative continuity. There have been connective threads going through, and Omar Khan has been deeply involved with that for a long time now. I want to see what that secret sauce is in Pittsburgh that has allowed them to remain relevant for so long.
And if I'm John Elway, it's worth my 3 hours times 10 to find out, what do these people think of Drew Lock and Von Miller? Are these guys that would have a lot of interest if we didn't want them? Or are these guys where all 10 people we interview, however many people we interview, say, nope, I'm moving on from Drew Lock? And shouldn't that be a really good information gathering session for you? If literally 10 people say, no, we're not going Drew Lock, or if 5 of them say we are going Drew Lock, or if all 10 of them say, I like the progress he made at the end of the season, that's huge information right there, because the Broncos have looked at Drew Lock from such a different perspective than the rest of the league. And also you can get their takes on Von Miller and other guys like that. So I just think that there is no downside to doing this, unless the only downside is if George Paton says, look, if you offer me the job today, I'll take it. If not, I'm going to listen to the Lions offer or something like that. And then you have to make a decision. I would get that. But if there's no rush from that side, then don't rush this process this week.
And speaking of picking people's brains, wouldn't you want to interview Rick Smith and find out a little bit more about the Texans situation and what you think their thoughts might be on Deshaun Watson and what you think you might be able to do to acquire Deshaun Watson? That's the last thing that I wanted to talk about here in the first segment. Last time we talked, I believe, was Thursday morning, and the Deshaun Watson thing was very young. And we use the term pipe dream a lot in that. And while it's still a long shot, I believe, that he would end up in Denver, the chances of him being traded seem to have gone up exponentially since we talked about that. This is a serious problem in Houston that's brought upon by themselves. And I'm just curious what you guys think. is he going to be traded? Do the Broncos have any chance?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. The Patriot way we were talking about earlier is now seeming to maybe take place in a different city. Of course, the Patriot way, when it was brought to Denver, got Jay Cutler traded right away. The Patriot way being brought to Houston may bring Deshaun Watson to be traded as well. And guys, I think right now he will be traded, which is crazy. And I think you pointed it out perfectly, Ryan. The chances that he ends up in Denver, I think, is still a pipe dream. Entering this weekend, I like the Broncos' chances, and I still like the Broncos' chances if he's traded. But I think the Miami Dolphins, before even seeing things yesterday, just a perfect fit potentially, because Houston would get a lot in return as well, and it would just make sense on what could sway them to make that trade is potentially not just getting Tua, but potentially getting Tua, being able to flip Tua, and then get Justin Fields with the 3rd overall pick or something like that. So that would be my favorite place for him to go right now. And it's crazy how they're going to potentially trade Deshaun Watson, and really how this situation, Ryan, went from a crazy pipe dream to something like, oh, wow, this could happen.
Yeah, and that's where, unfortunately, the value of Drew Lock right now kind of hurts you a little bit, because it's possible that Houston could send Deshaun Watson on to Miami and get back to and say, okay, we're good, and we're good, and maybe we get back the number 3 overall pick that we sent to Miami for Tunsil, and then they take Penei Sewell and they give Tua that protector that he needs on the offensive line. The fact the Broncos, the young quarterback they would throw in is anything but a slam dunk starter, at least as he's perceived league wide, that hurts their ability to make a deal. Like, for example, I mean, it may not even be a young quarterback. I mean, a team that I could see getting into this if Deshaun Watson is on the market is the Minnesota Vikings. And they could say, well, we can give you Kirk Cousins, and at least you're covered at quarterback for the 2021 season, somebody that they may like, even though he's more of a veteran. And I think it would be insane to basically say we'd rather have Kirk Cousins than Deshaun Watson, but there's a lot of this that really is insane at this point. But if they trade for Drew Lock, they still have a hole at quarterback. If they trade for Tua, potentially in their minds, if they trade for Tua, if they have a trade that involves Kirk Cousins, you can name a couple other guys, even Matthew Stafford. They'll feel like, okay, we've got our starter. And unfortunately, that's why the Broncos, they're not going to be on the list of favorites to land Deshaun Watson.
First of all, I don't think Tua is a slam dunk starter by any means. But
he is for 2021. If you bring Tua in, he's what
I'm saying is I just don't for you. I don't think he's proven by any stretch of the mind so far that he's going to be a hit in the NFL.
Oh, he's not, but if you bring him in, he's the guy that you're starting in 2021. There's a backup, but there's not competition. If you bring in Drew Lock, there's competition.
For sure. Second of all, I think what's being missed here is it's not up to the Texans. This isn't about what deal the Texans get as the best deal. This is about where Deshaun Watson says he wants to go. And so that, on one hand, could make you feel better about the Broncos' chances, and on the other hand, it could help the Broncos' chances. And so this situation, you have to hope that the Broncos players really honestly could court Deshaun Watson into wanting to be traded to Denver. Obviously, you couldn't have John Elway having dinner with him like you did with Peyton Manning and telling him all those things, because that would be tampering. But you could have the Cortland Suttons and the Jerry Judys of the world and whoever trying to help Deshaun Watson, think that Denver is a good place for him, because that's what's going to end up happening, in my opinion. He might give them a list of teams, and then they can pick from them. And the original reporting is that he might be open-minded to Miami. Superstars do love going to Miami. So you never know. But I will say that's what your hope would be. You're holding out if you're the Broncos, is the Broncos end up having the best offer for whoever is, the teams that Deshaun Watson approves. And
the Broncos' new GM makes it clear that he's not going to trade Cortland Sutton for a second-round pick.
Exactly. So it's still on the pipe dream side of things, but it's still exciting to think about, and it certainly gains steam since the last time we talked about it. that he is very potentially going to be traded. And if the Broncos, we had this conversation on the tailgate. It was actually really good. Some of the best football discussion we have ever had on that show, which is very loosely about football discussion. In my opinion, if the Broncos can get into the sweepstakes, they should prepare the best possible offer to make the Texans, just outbid whoever.
Well, guys,
3-1s and what?
Bradley Chubb and Cortland Sutton.
Oh
and
my gosh.
And guys, we may be overpricing it. I mean, if you see some other things out there, I mean, I saw a lot of potential trade offers out there and over the weekend, and they just made me think, are you kidding me? You could get Deshaun Watson for this cheap? No, I thought all of those were crazy, but maybe everyone's looking at us and saying, you're way too crazy. You're not going to have to give up that much. And boy, if that's the case, holy cow, you do it in even quicker heartbeat.
When has there been a 25-year-old quarterback like this on the market?
So that was asked to me on Sunday, and I was like, maybe Mace would know, but I don't think this has ever happened.
I mean, I can't recall a young quarterback like this a young quarterback who's proven, a young quarterback who has guided his team to success in the postseason. Clearly in the top handful of quarterbacks, top 5, clearly in the elite. Usually if someone like this is available, it's Peyton Manning coming off an injury, heading into his mid to late 30s, and there's a risk. These guys just don't come up on the market ever. I can't. Yeah, I mean, I'm racking my brain to think about when somebody who's proven like this. I mean, there have been unproven guys or guys who've had ups and downs who've become available and have done well. I mean, Ryan Tannehill is a good example of that, but somebody who's universally acknowledged as among the elite quarterbacks at such a young age. I've never seen the notion of them trading him. To me, it's so farcical because it just hasn't been done.
It hasn't been done. It shouldn't be done, but they screwed it up bad enough that it might have to be done. And the reason it doesn't happen is because usually when teams have a franchise quarterback, they don't screw up their relationship, especially when they're we went over this. The furthest back you could probably put him is 6. And now that Lamar Jackson has a playoff win under his belt, I think you could, you can make the case that you put him above Deshaun Watson. At the same time, Russell Wilson was not good at all for like the entire second half of the season. So maybe you bump him out of the top 5 and you put Deshaun Watson in. It's tough, coming off of that season. So you could put him at 6. Usually when you have a top 6 quarterback in the NFL, you bend over backwards to make sure your relationship with them stays steady. They mess that up. And to people saying, well, they're going to lose the leverage because he's demanding his way out. There's several things that cause leverage. One of them is going to be the amount of teams that are interested. Now, again, he could, cut off their legs with their leverage and say, I'm only going to one of these 2 teams, pick your favorite offer. Now the leverage is gone. But the leverage will be that probably 20 teams would all be interested in getting Deshaun Watson at the very least. So no leverage will be lost there. It will be a full-on bidding war.
If you're Nick Caserio, are you letting Deshaun Watson pick your head coach in order to keep him?
Yes.
100%. Coaches come and go more than quarterback. It's a lot easier for me to find a good head coach than a good quarterback. It's no question. And by the way, just the one thing I'll think about the Broncos is this. They do have a high school teammate of Deshaun Watson's on their team.
Who's that?
Alexander Johnson.
Oh, right. I saw the picture of those two.
Yeah, they crossed over together at Gainesville High School in Gainesville, Georgia for a year. So just saying.
AJ, get to work.
Come on, man.
All right. Well, long first and live segment here, but we're going to flip over to the podcast side of things for the rest of things. Thanks to everyone who tuned in on the live side. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd love if you hit us with a thumbs up, a subscribe. You can even sign up for alerts every time we go live. It's a pleasure to have spoken with you guys this morning. We'll see you on the podcast side of things.